remember being surrounded with family and friends all the time who loved me and supported me and accepted me, obviously, for who I was and what I was. I didn't know and didn't even realize that I was different to everybody else. I mean, I looked different. I knew that. I'm sure I knew that. But I didn't think it was such a big deal because I knew that I was just like everybody else, just looked different. And I guess the first time where my mum tells me that I realized that I was different to everybody else was when I went to kindergarten. And on my first day, she said I just cried and cried and cried and didn't want to go the next day because all the kids would tease me and point their finger at me and laugh at me and reject me. And I felt very much alone when I went to kindergarten. And I always had support from my parents and my family always to just know that I was special. Everybody told me, Nick, that's okay, you're just special. I didn't want to be special, you know, I wanted just to be like everybody else. And as I went through school, I learned how to do things like everybody else, like write with my foot and type with my foot. As I grew up, I started asking questions to mum and dad, knowing that now I was different to everybody else, and people asked me, what happened? And I didn't know. You know, I couldn't give any answers. I say, well, it just happened. I mean, we don't know. And I really got upset sometimes because there were no answers. And every time I asked my mum and dad, why did this happen? And they saw the distress in my heart. They saw the frustration I had in me. And all they could say was, only God knows. Only God knows. You know, the doctors couldn't give any answers. There was no medical explanation for it. My mum was in fact a nurse back then and delivered many babies before I was born, and she knew exactly what to do and what not to do when she was pregnant with me. And so she took even precautions. She actually, in her testimony in my book that's coming, she actually had a premonition that something was going to happen in her first pregnancy. So she didn't even take Panadol when she was having a headache or anything like that, painkillers or anything like that. So she just made sure that everything that she did was fine. And just happened. We don't know. And there were 3 ultrasounds done. And the miracle is that no one found out that I had no arms and no legs until I was actually born. So in the ultrasounds, they just thought that I was in a particular position where they just couldn't see my arms and legs, but they believed that they were there. Because we take it for granted every baby is born with arms and legs. So when I was born, my parents' reactions were obviously just shock. I mean, they had no warning, and everybody was saying everything was fine, and they were expecting a beautiful, young, healthy boy, which they did. They got a young, healthy, beautiful boy. I'm beautiful, but just with a few parts missing, and it was just such a great tragedy. Really, my parents back then were very strong Christians and are still today, and my dad was, in fact, one of the pastors of our church back then. And it was just such a really, really testing point in their faith as well. And not just their lives, but it was a big test for the church, asking God why. Why would God let that happen? If he says in the Bible that I formed you in your mother's womb, that he has a hope and future for everybody, then what was God thinking when he made Nick Vujicic? And it was just such a big thing, and to have a firstborn child or a husband and wife, it is life-changing. But even more so when they have a disability, I believe it was just something that was, that they just had a fear of inadequacy. What are we going to do? What are we going to do with this boy? Is he going to, what kind of life is he going to live? My dad actually initially thought that I was just going to die. But they found out that, no, I have everything else is working fine, and I was going to live. And they were going through many stages. Stages of denial, sometimes thinking, no, this is not happening. This is just a nightmare. They thought that any moment now they're going to wake up from this nightmare. And my parents went to doctor to doctor to doctor and just tried to find out and trying to reason with this and trying to just comprehend what happened. And for some reason we want to have that comfort of just understanding the situation. And they were looking for an answer, and no one had any answers. And there are many times in our life where we are looking for answers and we don't get them. Sometimes we will not get some answers. And this is where we walk by faith and trust in God. And my parents realized this, that, hey, this is my son and my own flesh and blood. And God has blessed me with this child. And he's going to give me sufficient grace to raise him with wisdom, with grace, with compassion, and with love, just as if I had arms and legs. Because God does have a reason for everything. But it took several months for them to come to that stage of peace and where they could fully commit all that I am to Jesus Christ and for his purpose. I am just so thankful and grateful to God for giving me such awesome parents. Yes, he's been giving them grace. Yes, it's only because of him that they managed to overcome it and get through one day at a time. But I'm just so thankful that they are in my life, because if they weren't there, I would have given up a long time ago, especially at school. You know, when people did tease me, I was trying to find my identity at school and trying to find my friends. And see, a lot of people at first, when they see me, they don't know if I have a mental disability. They don't know to what extent they can have a conversation with me, what depth and all that sort of thing. So they don't know how to approach me. They sort of avoid me. But once I open up my mouth and they see that, you know, I'm just like everybody else, they warm up to you. And you just, you know, crank that smile up and they're like, hey, you know, this guy's cool, sort of thing. So basically my parents, when I was discouraged at school, my parents just encouraged me to just talk to people, because that was the key, to show everybody that I was just like everybody else. And it was very hard. It was very hard to at times take that leap of faith, take that courage, and I believe that's only by the grace of God that I had that courage to step out and just make friends and you know, try to blurt out all the negative comments that were coming in day by day. And I know how it feels to be put down by people every day. But I also know how impacting some people's encouragement was in my life. And that's why I have a passion today to reach out to the youth, primary school and high school, to not judge those. And I mean, even as adults, we judge people, you know, we stereotype people just by the way they look. And it's wrong. It's wrong. You know, Jesus died for them too. You know, God loves them as much as he loves you. Why should we put anyone down? It's not right. And it's not how you look, it's who you are. And that's what I've seen in my life. And that's the truth. That God looks on the inside, that he has a special plan for each and every one of us. And the last thing I would hate to know in my life is that I was teasing somebody and that my words crushed them. You know, we just joke when we're teasing at school. When we're teasing people at school, we're just mucking around, we're just kidding. But deep down, we know how hurtful it can be. Eventually, my confidence grew and grew, day by day, having the support of my family and now having my friends beside me. I started to believe that I was like everybody else. I started to believe that my life was worth living. There were many times where I didn't feel like life was worth living. But this confidence grew and grew, and I praise Jesus that he gave me that comfort through the struggles. But gaining respect from students, I also realized that I had a gift for speaking, and a lot of people looked up to me in many ways. And I was voted by the school, the students there, to be school captain of my primary school and vice school captain of my high school. And so I was very well known by many students and was friends with everybody, Nick loves everybody, that sort of thing. But it was great. And it's not as if I woke up one morning with this confidence, like I woke up, bang, and I got this confidence, God's with me, he's got a purpose. No, it was just an eventual, it's basically, it's a journey. It's a journey. It was character building. And I always had my parents with me, and a lot of people ask me, well, how did you do it? How did you get through those hard times when you wanted to give up in life? And it's one day at a time with Jesus. And obviously my parents introduced me to having a relationship with Jesus and having a friendship with him. But I tell you, the time in my life where I asked him to come into my life was when I was 15 years old. You see, it wasn't just to say, okay, well, now I'm going to change the things about me. I'm going to stop doing this, or I'm going to start doing that. It was basically a decision in my life to say, Jesus, I trust in you. I believe your word. I believe that you have a plan for my life. And how did he let me know that I had a plan? Not just from Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11, where it says that God has a plan, a hope, and a future for our lives, but a story that I read in the Bible changed my life and convinced me that God is with me. And it was in John chapter 9 where a man was born blind, and there was no reason for it, quote, medical reason. Back then no one knew why and had no answers as to why this had happened. And I know that in my life I had no answer to why I was born this way. And so as Jesus was going through this village and came across this man, people were asking him, why was this man born blind? And Jesus said it was done so that the works of God may be revealed through him. And it just hit me so hard. All my life, all I've wanted was to know that somebody understands. Just someone knows what I'm going through. Because no one knew what my pain was. And that's why I didn't believe people when they said everything's going to be okay. Because they didn't understand what I was going through. They didn't know my future. But Jesus did. And he does. And he has a reason for everything. That he knew me and formed me in my mother's womb. That I'm wonderfully and fearfully made. That God has a purpose and his works will be revealed through my life. And at that moment I thought, well, God, I now fully believe and trust in you. That you do have a plan for my life. And I want to start a friendship with you. And I want to find out more about this purpose you have for my life. And so when I said this prayer to Jesus, Jesus, forgive me of all that I've done wrong, and I thank you, Jesus, that you died on the cross for my sins, and that I have a hope and a plan in you and a purpose. This peace just flooded over my heart, because not only was I very burdened with the disability that I had and the situation that I had, but I was also burdened with much guilt in my life. We've all done something wrong, and I always thought of God, obey the 10 Commandments, and you got to stop doing this, and you got to stop doing that, a God of regulations and rules. But it's not that. It's when you decide to live for him, and he changes you bit by bit, and you don't want to swear anymore. He changes your heart. And not only does he change your heart, but as you ask him to reveal more of the plan he has for you, he does. He doesn't reveal it to you straight away. And he doesn't change you straight away. It's that journey that I'm talking about with Jesus. And he doesn't promise a life of smoothness. He doesn't promise an easy life. He doesn't promise that when you go through the fire, I'm going to put out the fire. He says, when you go through the fire, I'm going to be with you. And this is it. Asking Jesus to come into your life, all it means now is that he's with you. And I recall and recollect a poem that did touch my heart very deeply. It's called Footprints. It's very famous. And it's a beautiful story of a man walking along the beach in the sand with Jesus. And the man looks back and he says, how come in the easy times of my life I saw 2 footprints, and in the hard times of my life I only see 1? And Jesus says, through the easy times I was walking beside you, but through the hard times is when I carried you. And it just touched my heart to just know that God is with you. That even when you don't see those footprints next to you, even when you don't feel like God is next to you, it's then he carries you. And by giving my life to Jesus, I know that God is in control. My life is in his hands. I don't need hands. I don't need feet. God is carrying me. Jesus is with me all the way. And that's awesome about God. But the greatest thing is that I now, having Jesus in my heart, have discovered an awesome purpose and joy in my life. Everybody wants to find their purpose in life. And I have found mine. And that's to give hope to the world in any way that I can. From the smallest ways to the biggest ways. But I've seen the greater purpose of my disability. That when people see me without arms and legs, they can tangibly see that you can, by God's grace, conquer any struggles and any circumstances. That no matter how big your storms are in life, that God is bigger. That he has a purpose for even the worst parts of your life. That all things come together for the good. And there is no greater joy than knowing that Jesus is with me all the way, that he will never leave me, that there is a greater purpose to each and every storm in our life. And maybe you have a storm or some circumstance in your life that you don't see that greater purpose right now. You don't have that joy or peace. And all we have to do is just call upon him, and he will give you that grace, and he will give you that clarity of vision day by day, of knowing that every single downtime we have, that God is molding us, he's making us, and he's making me into the man he wants me to become. And I want to challenge you that if you don't have that purpose, but you know that you're wanting something more to life, there's got to be more to life, I want you to know that you can find it in Jesus, and he's only a prayer away.